Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and today we're going to be talking about the archetypes. As very evident by my last video, many of you were still very curious about many of the changes to the archetypes themselves, so that's what we're going to do today. It's going to be not necessarily a long video, so there are a total of 35 archetypes in Player Core 2, which is insane. Now, I have only made a video on 17 of these because I went in alphabetical order, and so there's just a lot of other archetypes in between. And rather than making an hour-long video on all the changes, instead, I'm going to do up through the ones I've done before as like a part 1. And then I'm going to start releasing the full why this archetype is awesome, including the changes from Legacy to the Remaster with videos moving forward. Now, this does mean that some of your favorite archetypes are not going to necessarily be covered, but honestly, by the time I would get to it anyway, the book will have already released. So it just makes the most sense to me to now just use the fresh new archetypes to do a video, but now they're going to jump up in the queue because now I'm just going to do what came out in Player Core 2 rather than going alphabetically as I was before. So at the very least, you're going to be seeing these videos coming soon, which is going to be really good. And also, I want to cover some other stuff before the book finally releases tomorrow, I guess, when that would release. So that's just the way we're going to do it here. So sorry if your favorite archetypes weren't covered in this one. There were just a lot anyway, and I don't want to go through 35 archetypes, try to digest all the information, and then compress it all into a video. That'll just take a lot of time, and I would like to get this out before the book releases. So yeah, we'll do the ones I've already done, and the rest will just go out as normal. So before we get started, though, I do want to state that this is not a sponsored video. Paizo did send me a PDF version of Player Core 2, but all thoughts and opinions here are my own, as this is not sponsored content, as obvious by some of the videos I've been making recently, I would hope. So that being said, let's go ahead and get to the video. Starting off with Archaeologist. So Archaeologist only had a change to one of its feats, Settlement Scholastics, which now, rather than just giving you expert proficiency in a lore associated with a settlement, you now gain the additional lore feat, which is way better because now you will get up to legendary proficiency eventually with that particular lore. Now, for some campaigns, that's not necessarily such a big deal, but for other campaigns, it's a massive deal, as this allows you to, as long as your campaign mostly takes place in like a city in particular, this is eventually just going to make you super knowledgeable in everything in that city, which is really cool and very interesting. So honestly, a straight up buff to Archaeologist. Now, the Acrobat dedication was completely unchanged. So if you liked it before, you're going to like it now. The Archer dedication saw some interesting changes. So something that came out with Player Core 1 was the split between bows and crossbows. They are now two different weapon groups. So that makes sense that Archer dedication, which only applied to bow weapons, needed to be split up if it wanted to cover all the same weapons it did before. So it now specifically mentions bows and crossbows. But another big change, and this is going to be something that we're going to see very commonly moving forward, is the removal of the fighter buff. So there are many feats in Legacy Pathfinder 2nd Edition that allow fighter to essentially get their heightened weapon proficiency with more than just one weapon group through picking them up through typically archetype dedications. Now, that's no longer the case. As you can see here in the dedication, it now states you just treat martial weapons as simple weapons for the sake of proficiency, and advanced weapons as martial weapons for the sake of proficiency. No longer does it state that you can improve your proficiency with these weapons if you get a proficiency increase with any other kind of weapon. Essentially, now fighter can no longer have two weapon groups, or I guess three in this case now, that are going to be at their highest weapon proficiency. Overall, this is just a balance thing. It makes a lot of sense, and it makes fighter just so much less oppressive in the combat space. Now, not being the best in both melee and ranged combat, they have to choose one or the other, which honestly makes a lot of sense, and it helps out a lot of other classes. So slight fighter nerf, but a nerf to most of the other classes instead. Now we get access in the additional feats to the crossbow ace feat, which is pretty good. And speaking about crossbow related feats, crossbow terror got nerfed. So no longer does it provide the additional damage bonus for using crossbows. Now you get that +2 circumstance bonus to an intimidation check, as it's been turned into a reload action, which I think is kind of cool. Making it a reload action that you can also demoralize the enemy is pretty good. Though a lot of people are going to say that they're going to want that +2 damage. But now that we have martial crossbows, this is just a necessary change, because there's crossbows that just do more damage. Overall, this is for the sake of the health of the game. No longer can you really push a singular weapon group, mostly crossbows, to do absurd amounts of extra damage on top of everything, like if you used gravity weapon and all kinds of stuff. Now it's just, it makes a lot more sense. Is the feat going to be taken a lot less now? Probably. But it all is also not a mandatory feat take, which you can also look at as a positive. Regardless, people are going to be split whether they like this change or not. I'm of the opinion of, let's not make certain weapons particularly really powerful, especially when it comes to something that, you know, fighters used to get access to and could crit way easier with. So yeah, I think overall this is good for the health of the game. Now, we did get a really cool new feat in the Archer dedication. We got unobstructed shot. It's a very fun feat, and it's kind of weird because it's never going to be used for, I think, its intended purpose. So it's a 2-action feat. It requires you to be expert in athletics, and essentially you can trip an enemy and shoot the enemy with the same multi-attack penalty, and only counting as one attack for the sake of your multi-attack penalty. Now, this is a 2-action ability, so there's no action compression here, but there is map efficiency, which is really cool. Now, the feat's supposed to be designed to, like, get an enemy out of the way so you can shoot another enemy without the cover bonus, but that's not how it's going to be used. More often than not, the players are going to trip an enemy and then shoot them point blank from right above, which is pretty good. Now, this also allows you to shove an enemy first before making the shot, which does allow you to prevent reactive strikes against your character for using a ranged weapon, as long as you push that enemy out of your range, which also can make this a safer option for your character as well. And because there's no map pressure here, there's no increasing a map when using these actions, it's a pretty good feat in all honesty. So unobstructed shot is really good and a very fitting change for the Archer dedication, which did lose some of its combat effectiveness, I guess. Not a lot, but still some. So this is a pretty good feat to kind of make up for it a little bit. Oh, and speaking of access, I didn't mention this before, but of the additional feats, we also get access to Impossible Volley, which does give us a really good level 20 option if we're using the free archetype rule, which, hey, everyone should be using the free archetype rule. Free archetype rule is really good anyway, so if you have that as your free archetype, then you would now have a really good level 20 feat to select, which is pretty cool. Now, the Assassin dedication saw a lot of changes. Now, the Assassin archetype itself, not quite so much, but the dedication itself definitely did. First of all, the prerequisites are much less severe than they used to be. Now you don't need to be trained in crafting or have alchemical crafting. You only need to be trained in stealth and deception. Though Mark for Death got some changes, and I'm not necessarily hyped about these. So before, Mark for Death, which still does a lot of the same things it used to before, giving you a bonus to perception checks to seek or to deception checks to feint, it used to make your agile and finesse weapons gain the deadly D6 trait and backstabber trait, or upgrade the deadly die if it already had deadly before. Now it's been kind of nerfed. You now just get sneak attack. Now, this used to be a separate feat, which has now been compressed into it, so we no longer have sneak attacker. We now just have this sneak attack action pretty much put in, which is in some ways a buff, because this would do more damage than backstabber typically, though losing Deadly is a bit much in my opinion, and I really liked having Backstabber, especially because Expert Backstabber is still a feat, which means that unless you're using a Backstabber weapon specifically, it's a bit harder to make use of that feat if you do select it. Overall, I'm not a big fan of the changes, but I'm pretty sure that this was mostly as a balancing thing, because giving weapons extra traits, especially if they're in the Agile or Finesse group, is a very powerful action, and giving Backstabber, especially to some weapons, just made some really, really good high damage finesse weapons even better. Though I will say there's a very interesting thing where now the sneak attacker feat essentially got buffed in the dedication, where now if you already had sneak attack, you deal an additional precision damage or additional precision damage if you're at 6th level, which is pretty good. So if you're a rogue and you're going into assassin, hey, the dedication for you has just gotten better, even though you don't have access to a free Backstabber Deadly D6 Agile or Finesse weapon. So, I preferred it the way it was before, but I can definitely see why they made the changes that they did. Moving on already, Bastion just gained access to the improved reflexive shield feat in its additional feats. So, yeah, that was all that changed. Just allowing Bastion to do Bastion things just a little bit better. Now, Beastmaster saw an interesting change. No longer does it have access to wild empathy, which is really strange. I don't know why this feat was kind of excluded from this particular archetype dedication, but I guess it is what it is. There was a buff, though. Enlarged Animal Companion used to be an additional feat we could select at level 10. Now we can select it at level 6 with picking up the Advanced Warden spell additional feat, which you can see here, which is a 4-level increase, and an Enlarged Animal Companion is a particularly good focus spell. So I'm actually very happy to see this. That's overall a huge buff. And speaking about huge buffs, we also gained a new feat for Beastmaster called Swift Guardian. Swift Guardian is a free action you get at the beginning of initiative, where you could swap out your current active animal companion or one of your active animal companions if you have lead the pack, which is really good. This allows you to have an animal companion that's used mostly as a mount, and swapping it out for your combat animal companion when combat starts, which is very powerful. So overall, it's really good, and it allows you to now make better use of having a utility animal companion and combat animal companion at the same time, which I think is overall really needed, and it makes Beastmaster which is already a really good archetype dedication, into an even better one. Now, unfortunately, Blessed One got mega nerfed in a way. So Blessed One has lost access to all the feats that specifically altered or gave special bonuses to lay on hands. Now, many of these feats were had by the champion class, and since the champion class no longer has access to these feats, I was really hoping that they were just moved to Blessed One to make Blessed One even better, but they're not here. In fact, the additional feats are very minuscule, and instead only giving us the essentially improvements to Mercy along with Mercy, so that we can be that cure-all character that Blessed One was supposed to make you be. Now, of course, when it comes to any kind of legacy content, speak to your GM, and more than likely, they'll just let you use the legacy content anyway. But I bring this up more particularly because for society play, this is a mega nerf, because the new edition of Blessed One no longer has access to these feats. So if you have an archetype, or if your character is blessed and has, or was going to take some of these feats, you are no longer going to have access to them, as the new version is going to override the old version. So a bit of a nerf to society play, honestly, which is very strange. Now, in addition to that, you can see that Ultimate Mercy got added to the list because it's a new feat in general. So that's good. But yeah, Blessed One kind of getting the big nerf stick, which is very unfortunate. Maybe we'll see some adjustments to this in Divine Mysteries or War of the Immortals. I'm really not sure. But as things currently stand, the Blessed One just got hit really hard, unfortunately. Next up, we'll talk about Bounty Hunter, and some of you might be like, there's a Bounty Hunter dedication? Yeah, it's a very underused dedication. It's pretty fun, but it's honestly not that great. So the Bounty Hunter dedication saw a slight change. Now, if you already have Hunt Prey with the dedication feat, rather than becoming expert in survival, you gain access to the Monster Hunter feat, which, by the way, is now an additional feat that we have access to. Overall, I think this is generally a buff. Getting a feat rather than a skill increase, I think, is always considered a net positive. Though I could see definitely getting a free expert increase to be really good, especially if you're a ranger and you want to use your skill increases for something other than survival, sure. But I think getting this is particularly good, and it just could potentially save you a feat depending on your build. So overall, a pretty good change. Though I will say Tools of the Trade got a slight nerf to fighters specifically, because it's the same thing as we were talking about with the archer dedication, where no longer is it just equal to your highest weapon proficiency kind of stuff. Now you just treat all these weapons as simple weapons for the sake of proficiency. So yeah, fighters, I guess, get to cry a little bit more about losing some extra feats in the situation. That's just going to be the thing moving forward. So fighters are just going to have to deal with it. I'm not going to cry about it. Fighters are already really strong. Now, the Cavalier dedication is completely unchanged, which is good because it was a really long archetype dedication, and I didn't want to make an hour-long video with that in mind. So if you liked Cavalier before, it's more or less the same, so that's good. If you're expecting some changes, though, tough luck, I suppose. The Celebrity dedication saw an interesting change to one of their feats. Mesmerizing Gaze no longer gives the action either the Arcane or Occult trait, which is very interesting. I don't know what this actually affects, and maybe just makes this no longer a magical effect, which makes sense. But I don't know. Maybe one of you in the comments can let me know if this actually changes anything profoundly or not. I don't see how particularly this is a big change. All right, so we're more than halfway through some of the feats or some of the archetypes at this point, so I just wanted to take this moment to say, hey, if you're enjoying the content, leave a like. In fact, liking any kind of Pathfinder content, not just my own, is going to help Pathfinder get out more in the YouTube algorithm. And if you want more people to play Pathfinder, or to at least know about the game, then I recommend giving a like to anyone's video as well as mine. In addition, if you like my content specifically and you want to get all the newest stuff that's coming out, I tend to get early reviews of most of the materials. So if you want to be in on all the new stuff, I recommend subscribing. That helps the channel a lot. We gained over 1,000 subs this last month, which is the biggest month of growth we've had on the channel. And we're not going to be stopping here. I'm going to be getting the Starfinder 2E stuff soon, and we're going to see a lot of really big changes. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't miss out on it. Or at the very least, if you don't want to give a sub on the channel, you can join our Discord linked in the description below, where you can talk to other tabletop nerds and get notified whenever a video comes out. But let's go ahead and finish off this video, shall we? So the Dandy dedication was pretty much unchanged. So if you liked it before, you'll like it now. Dual Wielder saw an interesting change. They now have access to Quick Draw as an additional feat, which is pretty good. It makes a lot of sense for a character that uses multiple weapons to be able to draw a weapon more easily, so I'm very happy to see that. And also, Dual Weapon Reload, I think, got a buff, but I think has also got an error here in the book. So the old Dual Weapon Reload allowed you to essentially reload when both your hands were full, as long as both hands had a one-handed ranged weapon. Now, it does the same thing, but it's no longer a specific reload action. Before, it was a specific reload action where you spent the action to reload one of your weapons. Now, I don't think that's the case. If you read it here, it doesn't mention the interact action that it had before, which means now, as long as you have this particular feat, you can use any of the reload actions in addition to while wielding two weapons, which is really good. So I will say that the action marker that's here is actually erroneous. Probably just an error, a pretty small error at that one, the smaller ones, I would say, in this book. But that's a pretty big buff if you want to go a dual range weapon wielder. I say this is a really good change for you particularly. So Eldritch Archer didn't see many changes, but they did get a new feat, which I'll mention here in a moment. But Eldritch Archer kind of Eldritch Archer had to be recontextualized due to the changes to the bow and crossbow weapon split. So now many of their now their dedication, for instance, mentions crossbows specifically, and many of their feats got their names changed. Any feat that mentioned arrow has now been changed to ammunition or some variant that doesn't make it arrow related. So for instance, magic arrow has been changed to magic ammunition. Precious arrow has been changed to precious ammunition. Seeker arrow has been changed to homing shot. Phase arrow has been changed to incorporeal shot. Arrow of Unalife, yeah, YouTube, I know, has been changed to fatal shot. And we gain access to running reload as an additional feat, so that's really nice. But even bigger than that, we gain access to Eldritch reload. This is huge because this allows us to use crossbow weapons way easier. With Eldritch reload, if we use our Eldritch shot, which is a 3-action activity, by the way, which hasn't changed at all, now we can reload after that, which is really good. Or if we cast any spell or that uses a spell slot, or if we use any magic ammunition, which makes magic ammunition even better because now we can use magic ammunition, make a shot, free action reload, make another shot with our crossbow, and then reload with our final action. And we can reliably fire our crossbow twice around, every round, which is really good. That's pretty hard to do considering you could always fire twice around, but oftentimes, like if your first shot was a shot, then you have to reload and then shoot again, and then at the next turn, reload, shoot, reload. So no, yeah, this just allows us to get reliably 2 shots off with our crossbow, way more easier, making Eldritch Archer really good for crossbows, actually, a pretty substantial change. So yeah, Eldritch Archer kind of getting a buff here. Now, Gladiator saw some interesting changes as well. First of all, the dedication itself gives you additional lore rather than just being trained in Gladiator lore, which is really good. That means our Gladiator lore is going to get up to legendary proficiency eventually. Not that it's a particularly useful lore, but still, it's pretty good. And we still become trained in another lore if we were already trained in Gladiator lore, which is very good. Now, performative weapon training also saw an interesting change, and not only does it just make fighters cry now, because it can no longer be exploited, but we actually saw 2 new weapons got added, which is really cool. Now we get, in addition to the other ones, the Trident and the Warflail. And this feat got even better because it now provides crit specialization on top of everything else, which is really good, making Gladiator much more of a tempting archetype than it was before, if you ask me personally. And lastly, Call Your Shot did get buffed as well, now just straight up making the enemy frightened 2 rather than frightened 1, which it was before. And now finally, we're going to talk about the Herbalist dedication, which is the last dedication we're going to be talking about in this particular video, leaving the remaining 17, 18, I can't remember which at this moment, archetypes to be done in later videos. Oh my gosh, so many archetypes. By the way, I have an archetype video list if you guys were curious at all. I'll put a thing up here on the top, a little icon that you can go see. There's over 80 archetype videos in that list where I talk about a lot of the archetypes that came out in Pathfinder. There's so many. I love the archetype dedications so much. They make the game so much more interesting and dynamic, and in my opinion, are just much better than multi-classing in D&D personally. So yeah, go check that out. But let's talk about the Herbalist dedication. So the dedication kind of got nerfed a little bit. Before, so we used to get basic alchemy, and if you haven't seen my multi-class video where I talk about the alchemist changes, I'll just kind of bring up here. So now you gain access to advanced alchemy. Now this only gives you access to 4 items you can make a day rather than a number of infused reagents. But no longer are you just limited to just being left at only level 1 advanced alchemy, where you could only make level 1 items until you picked up a later feat, which was called expert herbalism, which has been removed because it's no longer necessary, though you no longer also gain the additional formulas for Elixir of Life when you get them, which is kind of sad. But now you only get 4 items you can make every day, but they're always going to be at the highest item level you can make, which is pretty substantial. Granted, you would used to be able to make a lot more, and for things like anti-plague or antidote, they were still pretty good even at the low level, so just having a bunch of them wasn't necessarily a big deal, and their level really didn't matter so much. So in a lot of ways, this is kind of a nerf to the Herbalist dedication. I'm glad that you can now just make Elixirs of Life at your current highest item level, which is really good. And as long as you know Elixir of Life, you don't need to learn the new higher proficiencies because there's the changes to crafting. So I guess I don't know why I was sad about it before. I just had forgotten, I guess, up until now. So yeah, you can just always make elixirs at your highest level, and that's pretty good. Now they can be better than they ever could have been before. So I think depending on the situation, this can be looked at as a nerf or a buff. But for me personally, I think this is overall a good thing for the Herbalist, as it just makes your Elixirs of Life way more effective for your party, especially in the late game. Now, due to the removal of infused reagents, some of their other feats actually got buffs. Fresh ingredients, for instance, no longer do you need to expend a batch to gain this bonus to either treat wounds or whatever. Now, you just do so automatically, which is pretty cool. And the same goes for endemic herbs, which also just no longer costs one of your batches. So pretty solid, honestly. Now, we do have a new feat that replaces expert herbalism called advanced herbalism that now just gives you access to more items at the beginning of the day. When you first pick this up, this allows you to make 6, and you can actually select this feat again at level 10 to make 8 items at the beginning of every day, which is pretty good. Overall, some of the alchemist changes some people are going to like, some of them are going to dislike. Herbalist, I feel like, is at a strange middle ground where some of the items it made before, their item level really didn't matter so much, so the changes doesn't give them a buff. Though Elixir of Life, on the other hand, is really good, and so having the highest level of Elixir of Life and honestly being able to have them higher and more frequently than you could before, I would say makes this overall good for the Herbalist. But I don't know. That's kind of, I think, a personal thing between you and Herbalist. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Already a 20-minute plus video. I think that's an appropriate amount of time. I did mention before, I do want to cover some other stuff before the book fully releases to kind of give everyone a little bit of something at the very least. So the remainder of the archetypes will be covered in their own Why This Archetype is Awesome video that I will be doing after I catch up, I think, on some Howl of the Wild ones that I missed earlier. Regardless, you're going to get to see all the changes eventually on the channel. And yeah, that's going to be it. We're almost here. We're almost at the day. It's going to be, what, 2 days after this video releases, typically, that the book releases, and a lot of that information is going to be coming out. And I do feel like Archive of Nethys is going to be coming out with a lot of this stuff first days. So if you want to see the changes, it's going to be available on Archive of Nethys, at least hopefully sometime in the future. I know they've been hiring a bunch of people for data input stuff. So it's been a lot. But there are still 17 other archetypes to see out there. And hey, maybe this is just a reason for you to go check out and get the books yourself. But yeah, hopefully I did right by y'all, but that's going to be it for me. Thank y'all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Lead the battle light to me, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.